1 week after the midterm elections, North Carolina congressional candidate Mark Harris tweeted this picture of himself at freshman orientation with other newly elected members of Congress, the freshman class. But now, Mr. Harris may find himself in Washington next year, not as a member of Congress, but, well, frankly, the subject of a looming investigation into possible election fraud. As promised, I'm joined now by phone by Gerry Cohen, a former special counsel for the North Carolina General Assembly and an expert on election law in the state. Jason Johnson will join me in a moment. But let me start with you, Gerry Cohen. What is going on in North Carolina? What is new in light of this action by the legislature?
Well, it's a whole labyrinth that runs back 2 years when the legislature tried to strip powers from incoming Democratic Governor Roy Cooper. He won 2 or 3 times in the state Supreme Court, and that was being resolved today with a new structure that restored powers to the governor effective January 31st. We had an ongoing investigation that a 3-judge court, a state court, had been supervising and extending its length repeatedly. And today, about 15 minutes after the legislature adjourned, it decided it wasn't extending its stay any longer, and the current state board of elections will expire tomorrow at noon, which may leave a 34-day hiatus while we try to resolve everything.
Which then in plain English means what? A month goes by, and then eventually it's most likely that the House Democrats in Washington will have the final say? Well,
there'll be 34 days potentially without a state board of elections. Thus, the January 11th hearing might not happen. It might leave the House to conduct its own investigation next week and not seat anyone. But there's a lot of research going on about other laws that might let the governor appoint the board under like an 1869 statute that deals with situations where there's offices and no provision for their appointment. So people are busy scratching their heads today, but everything was this court order 15 minutes after adjournment of the legislature for the year took everyone by total surprise.
I think our viewers are pretty familiar with some of the battles that have been waged in other states where there have been these so-called power grabs, Wisconsin, et cetera. Is this, in your view, the analysis that you've done, is this a similar power grab where basically you have otherwise duly authorized body dissolved because the legislature doesn't like what they were up to?
Well, this is, the 2016 action right after the election was very similar to what went on in Wisconsin and Michigan this year. But the difference here, and I hate to cast it in a partisan tint, but our state Supreme Court was 4-3 Democratic as the result of the 2016 election, a reversal. And now, starting next Wednesday, will be 5-2 Democratic because the Democrats have been carrying statewide elections. So our court struck down those power grabs 2 or 3 times in state court over the last 2 years. So it's put this back in balance.
But, I mean, I guess what I'm asking you is there any good reason for the Elections Board to be, as you put it, on a month hiatus or eliminated?
No, the court complained, and the 3-judge court order complained that the state board, by delaying its hearing till January 11th from the previous December 28th, was delaying any certification or resolution of the 9th District election. But by putting in a 34-day hiatus, it's delaying it even more unless the U.S. House steps in, perhaps on Wednesday, and takes over the investigation.
Gerry Cohen has been all over this, and as you said, folks are scratching their heads who study this for a living in North Carolina, let alone the rest of us who are wondering if it's going to affect the actual balance of power in the House, as well as, of course, the larger issues of whether these votes are being properly counted. You've been a great help to us tonight, so thank you, Gerry. I want to bring back in, as promised, Jason Johnson. You and I have the easy part because Gerry did the hard part, and it is certainly complex. But at bottom, what do you see happening here? And if it does look like a kind of a standstill with a lot of recriminating, fights back and forth inside the state, what do you see Pelosi and the House Democrats doing?
Ari, this is the stuff that I love. My doctorate's out of Chapel Hill, so I was steeped in North Carolina politics for my entire process. What this basically boils down to is this. There's 2 things that can happen. Either we wait 34 days Governor Cooper of North Carolina puts a brand new elections committee together. They call for a new election, and you end up probably with McCready, the Democrat ends up winning, and he ends up getting seated in the Congress sometime over the summer. That could happen if people are willing to wait that long. Or Nancy Pelosi next Wednesday, when she gets into office, if this is something that she cares about on her agenda, could say, look, we have reason to believe that this was a fraudulent election. We will not seat anybody that you have from North Carolina's 9th District unless we get to conduct an investigation as the House, and then we may suggest that you have to have another election. So one way or another, I think we're going to have another election. It could come from Congress, or it could end up coming from the governor of North Carolina.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating one, given that it is our one outstanding seat out there. Jason Johnson, thanks for riding along tonight. And tonight's last word is next.